Welcome to the Derek Loudermilk Show. This is 5 Minute Friday. And today we're going to be discussing a little story, an experience that I had in AutoZone the other day, where the manager was asking the customers if they wanted a job. He was asking them if they knew anybody that wanted a job or if they themselves wanted a job. He was recruiting from whoever walked in the door. And it sounded like they were having trouble filling spots for people behind the counters, people driving for deliveries. And the manager asserted that it's because people were too comfortable with the stimulus and the unemployment benefits that they were getting. So I had another experience where we had a refrigerator repairman come, and I was talking to him, and he said he was working overtime because his friends who he used to work with were not going back to work. And so he had to basically pick up the slack. I've heard from other friends that have salons or restaurants that they are having a hard time finding employees. So what's going on? We hear that there are a lot of unemployed people. And that, of course, makes sense because a lot of businesses shut down. But so what we're dealing with, it sounds like, is a lot of people who would rather be taking their unemployment benefits and their stimulus and not working. So this created some very lively discussion among my Facebook friends, and I thought I'd bring it here to you as well. So I just want to highlight a few things that are going on. One, some of these jobs, right? Fridge repairman, AutoZone worker, they're not that great. They're not some job that I would want. I would only want to work at those if I really liked cars or something like that, right? And so I did work, for example, in a bike shop back in the day. I worked for many years in bike shops, and that was only because I loved bicycles. One point that somebody brought up is that for so long, people's perception of their value to society has been tied to them working and what is their job and how they're earning a living. But fundamentally, humans have value no matter what they're earning and how much work they're actually doing. And I think for a lot of these people, this is the first time that they've ever been allowed to just be home with their families, to just be themselves, just to enjoy a day without the pressure of needing to work themselves to the bone. I was talking to my wife about this. She worked from the time she was 14 until she got pregnant at 33 with our kid. And she basically never had a break, even while she was in school. She's been working hard the whole time. And so when she was pregnant and wasn't working, that was the first time for her that she had allowed to just be who she was and just enjoy a day without needing to rush off and try to go earn something. Now, there's a fantastic experiment that I just saw the results of a universal basic income, which was actually just a $500 a month payment. It was done over the last year in Stockton, California. And the results actually showed that people were working more. They were healthier, they were paying off debts. And so this is a really positive indication that I've maintained for a long time, that if you give people psychological safety and you give them enough time, right? You give them some months or some years and they can just be themselves. At some point, they will not be satisfied with just going through a day eating and watching Netflix and whatever it is. They'll want to do something fulfilling. And that's when creativity happens. That's when entrepreneurship happens. That's when looking for problems to solve or looking for communities to give back to. That's when that happens. But first, psychological safety must happen. And so on one hand, I really like the fact that, we have these unemployment benefits and we have stimulus that's allowing people a little more psychological safety, especially people that otherwise might be forced to work in conditions that they don't really think are safe. Another thing that this brought up was, maybe this is a massive shift in our entire workforce, right? We've probably been relying on people to be in the office, to do things when we could have been using automation, when we could have been using Zoom, when we could have been eliminating certain things. And so it's almost like a collective up-leveling of all the jobs, So automation, robotics, and all these things will replace a lot of the things we're doing. And as I've talked about in my book, Superconductors, and have been thinking about for a long time, using our highest human potential of emotional intelligence and creativity and connecting and all these things, that's where I see it going. And I see this is sort of cracking the door open to shift the whole workforce towards that. I still feel empathy for the owners of the salons, of the restaurants that can't find employees, because not only are people not feeling safe, but we also have a demographics issue, right? The workforce is shrinking, qualified labor is shrinking, so employers are going to have to be competing even more for qualified candidates. And I think that's going to be something that's the companies that have already invested in their employees, they're well positioned to be the leaders in the next few years. Now let's just circle back to this concept of how our worth is tied to, in our minds at least, or in the system, how much money you make, and they're trying to place a value on you as a human, you as a person, based by what you're earning. And what if just for a second you imagined that nobody had to earn anything, nobody was forced to take a job because they were worried about meeting their basic needs, right? So if we had universal basic income, then this could all be taken care of. That opens up so many possibilities. It changes the whole frame of thinking. So just think about that for a second, because it's fundamentally a totally different system than the one we have. And the question is, do we like the results that we're getting from our current system? Well, in some ways, yes, there's great products and there's solutions that are found, and there's innovation and entrepreneurship and all these things. But we are left with so many struggling people. We're left with so many homeless people. We're left with so many sick people. I don't like a system that has a side effect of millions of people living sort of lives that I wouldn't want to live. So again, perhaps it's time to rethink the system itself. Perhaps our system, our financial system, our governmental systems, all these systems that lead to forcing people to seek employment that's not really what they want. These systems probably need to be changed, and they probably won't be able to be changed from the inside out. They will probably have to tear them down to some degree and rebuild them in order for us to get the outputs that we want. Because what you see around you, everything is the result of a system. And so to fundamentally have change, you have to change the underlying system to change the outputs. If we were to look at the pharma industry, for example, right? There's no profit incentive, right, to just cure people once. Like a pill you take once, there's not a lot of profit in there. So the system is set up to incentivize pills and treatments that you take over and over again. I think when people look at the unemployment benefits that they're getting, and it's actually, maybe it's even higher than they were making working a minimum wage job. And, some people might say like, oh, well, some of these folks, they're just inherently lazy. They would rather just not work and get the same money, or not work and get a little bit less. And that may be true for some people. But I really believe people are innately curious and innately want to improve their community, want to improve their own lives. And eventually, when you have stability, this will come into play. People will start doing new things. They'll start being inventive. And that's when we'll really see the benefit, the payoff for the economy. So one of the things I want to consider is, this is costing us trillions of dollars. The U.S. government, at least, and other governments around the world are putting out a lot of stimulus, a lot of relief packages. And, I've heard they're just going to print more money. They're just going to sort of create more money out of thin air to service all this debt that they're creating, and eventually that might create inflation. But what I really want to understand is if perhaps over the long run, right, over 5, 10, couple decades, if we actually end up creating more value for the world, for humanity at large, if we let people find the jobs and activities that really suit them, rather than having just sort of a default to where people are forced to take jobs so that they can get their basic needs met, even if they really don't want to be doing that. So would love to hear your thoughts, your experiences, if you've seen this showing up. One question is, are we giving people too much unemployment, too much stimulus, and it's disincentivizing them? Are we giving them the right amount? Should we be doing more? Where do you stand on universal basic income? If you were to give people universal basic income, would you give them $500? Would you give them $3,000? What would be the level that you would set? And what would you also be curious about learning more about to see if this really is a viable solution that sort of we should all be giving, the United States or other countries around the world, we should be giving everyone universal basic income. And what do you think would happen if we did that? One last note that I'll leave you with, and because we're getting in towards summertime, and last summer we talked a little bit about this as well, because there's a lot of riots here in the United States, and most crime, I did a little bit of research, most crime is tied to poverty in some way. So I believe that largely, we'd free up people to not have the same desire to riot or commit crimes. That would free up our police force to do better policing and safing and preventing murders, which is big here. And did I say saving? I think I did say saving. Anyway, I hope the police do lots of saving this summer. Getting off track. I want to wrap this, but there is evidence that if people weren't in poverty, that we'd have a lot less crime. And I do think universal basic income would solve a lot of that, and it'd probably reduce civil unrest. And so that's another huge side benefit I see, is just a lot more peace among the citizens of planet Earth. So I'm for it. I'm for universal basic income. I am totally happy for everyone to be taking as much stimulus and as much unemployment as they can. I took unemployment when I was laid off back in 2008. We were sitting around a table one evening. There was 8 or 10 of us, and I said, raise your hand if you have a job. Nobody had a job at that time. And since then, everybody at that table has gone on to, some people create multi-million-dollar businesses. Some people are ministers. Some people, are high-level journalists. Unemployment worked. It kept everyone from falling deeper into despair or poverty. And now we're contributing members of society. So the system works to a large degree, in my experience. So I'm totally for it. Want to hear your thoughts, want to hear your opinions, where you stand, what else haven't we considered, and what do you think the next few years of the economy are going to look like? What are the major shifts that you see coming for our economy? All right, that's all for today. Now it's your turn to go out there and make a difference and make money if you want.